Hello, I'm Terry Durham from River Hills Harvest Elderberries, and I've been growing elderberries for about 10 years. And I'm here today with my partner, Chris Patton.
I'm Chris, and I'm president of the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative. Although we literally have members from California to Virginia, most of our members are in the Midwest. And we're here today to talk to you about harvesting elderberries. And one of the main reasons that elderberry has not been a commercial crop to this point has been the difficulty of harvesting and processing those berries for on any kind of commercial scale. And it is about time to pick those berries, isn't it,
It
Terry?
is. It is about time, And so the first thing when you're getting ready to go pick berries is you got to decide when they're ripe.
Oh, yeah.
And most people will go out and they'll see some purple on there, and it's not going to be ready till the whole head. So the parameters for finding those ripe berries, you want to find the heads that are totally purple, that have very limited green in it, and they're starting to turn a little bit dull. Elderberries will start out as green, and they'll change into kind of a red color, and then get darker and darker till they're purple. And then just after that, they get a little bit dusty. They lose that shine. They're kind of like a blackberry. That first blackberry you see, you go out there and you pick it. It's dark and shiny, and you put it in your mouth, and it's not got any sweetness to it. It's not got any sugar in it yet. But if you wait a couple more days, it'll lose that shininess, get a little bit duller, and that's when it gets sweet. And that's the way the elderberry is. It'll be dark purple, but it won't quite be sweet until it turns a little bit dusty.
Hey, Terry, I know a lot of people that grow berries use a Brix meter in order to determine ripeness. Do we have any data on that?
We're beginning to learn about using a Brix to analyze the sugar content in elderberry. We like to see it around 12 to 13. That's not really high for a fruit.
No.
Now, we have gotten some batches. The highest batch we've ever tested was about 14. So we're beginning to learn to set parameters up for when they have enough sugar in them. We don't really know that yet. Right now we go by that color test. And the other way you can tell if there really has good juice in it is to take one of the little berries and just squeeze it between your fingers. And if it's purple juice, it'll make some juice.
That makes sense.
Before they're ripe, you'll squeeze them and it won't be purple.
Right. That makes sense. And this is important because if any of you have tried wild collecting elderberries, you know they don't ripen very evenly. Now, for commercial production, we've tried to work with cultivars that tend to ripen more evenly. And in particular, we found that if they are growing and getting a flower and a cyme on the first year's growth, what we call a primal cane, those berries do tend to be not only a little larger, but they also tend to ripen more evenly. And cultivars that do that on a primal cane may not ripen evenly if you don't cut them down every year. We've had that as well come up where Bob Gordon, for example, is very good at even ripening, and it has beautiful berries. It has a cyme that becomes dependent and everything. But if you don't cut it down the next year, you're going to have a ring of green in there. At least we did in some of the experiences, some of the farms and rows up here in Minnesota. But so that's a big part of it. Now, I have a few wild ones that I'm testing in my yard, and they don't ripen as evenly as these do. So what I have to do for them is I have to let it go a little bit further. When they start to first 5% are falling off the cyme, then the whole cyme is ripe enough to worry about trying to harvest that and get mostly ripe berries.
So generally, when it comes harvest time, if you have a very big planting that you're working with, you're going to go out there when you're just beginning, and they're going to look all purple, but there won't really be enough in there to justify to go out and to start to pick.
Right.
So you always got to be ready to pick, and they look like you think they're ready, then wait another day or two, and then they will be ready. It's kind of like picking pumpkins. That's what I learned a long time ago. You go to the field, when you think they're ready, you leave for about a couple of weeks, and then come back, and then they'll be right.
Yeah, elderberry really needs. I've noticed that some of the places where they don't get enough sun, they're going to be slower in that last stage of getting to ripening. That berry needs the sunshine to ripen.
And so it's important to find those berries when they're nice and ripe, and they're starting to get a little bit dull. And then what we like to do is to go in and we'll just break those heads off by hand. You can use clippers. Some people like to go in and they'll clip them with clippers just below on the stem, below where the whole clump comes together. And so you're going to
kind of like the cyme's got 5 pieces, kind of like a hand, and so you want to be doing it like right around here.
And so that naturally makes a little layer in there as it gets ripe that will break easy and it'll pop right off. And we just put those into a bucket. Now you need to start the day off with clean, sanitized buckets when you're picking, though.
Absolutely.
It's really important to maintain a clean area.
Well, it's just like growing, though. You've got to do your preparation first. If you don't prepare the soil, you're not going to have a good crop. You need to lay out your preparation for your harvest and processing. Why don't you talk a little bit more?
So you need to have some things ready before you go out to pick. Otherwise, you're just going to have your fruit, and you have to bring it to somebody else to get it destemmed. So you want to have a destemming process set up, or a place where you can destem those berries. Now, commercially, we like to use the large destemmers. They'll look like this. They'll do about 400 pounds of berries an hour, and that'll destem them, and then we can put them into that triple sink where we wash and sanitize them.
Right.
You can also use a small destemming tray like these that we make, which has the colander and then an insert. And you put the berries on here, the heads, and move them around from corner to corner, and it will take them right off. And I've gotten up to 100 pounds in an hour through one of these little hand destemmers before, and they work pretty good. They're not big enough to keep up with a big field, though. If you start getting more than 500 or 600 pounds, you need to get a bigger destemmer that will work.
And if you're really small scale, you can use a framed piece of hardware cloth, especially.
Well, you're not supposed to use hardware galvanized now.
But you can for your own use.
For your own use,
for commercial, if you're going to sell it, you've got to have the stainless.
Yep,
if
we're going to buy it, we have to have the food grade stuff. But for home use, there are a lot of different ways that you can destem them.
Right.
I even know people that destem them just by taking the umbrals and putting them in a big plastic bag and putting them in the freezer and letting them freeze, not packing them in tight, and then you just cut a little hole in the corner after you've beat it around, and the berries will just fall right out of the corner of that sack. Now you're going to have some stems on there. If you don't destem your berries when they're fresh, there's always going to be a little bit of stem that hangs onto that berry, and it's filled with tannin, and it will make whatever you're making with it have a little bit of an off taste.
Right.
So we like to get most of all of those berries out of there.
Even with like the mechanical destemmers, you want to do it right after they're picked, the day they're picked, because they're more flexible. They'll work through the destemmer more easily, and you'll get less stem on the berries.
So we like that. So the first thing we have to do, though, is to sanitize everything, because you have to have clean surfaces. You got to have clean picking containers when you go to the field to pick into.
Right.
They need to be sanitized. And so we have a simple system that we use with 3 sinks that we use for sanitizing. In the first sink, we'll put a sanitizing water in there. It's easiest way, and the way a lot of people use just chlorine bleach. You only need 10 to 50 parts per million to sanitize stuff. Well, a lot of city waters have that much chlorine in them. It's a very small amount, and then we have to test it. And you'll see that we have a nice sheet. They'll have a sample of it there for you. You can see where you fill that in each time you change water. So we start out with initialing that. You put the date on there, and then you're going to write on there the parts per million that water tested from a hard testing strip, which you can get those testing strips from different pool supply places. They're pretty easy to find. If you're certified organic, you're going to have to use an organic approved sanitizer and follow the instructions that they have on
a lot
there.
of them are peroxide based. But this is the process of River Hills Harvest is also what we at the co-op recommend, because you've been back and forth with the FDA on this, and we know that this will meet the requirements of any commercial buyer on any scale. People want those destemmed berries. They want them clean, and this is the way to go. Now, I do know also that if it's for your personal use, and in some states, they don't want you to wash the berries before you freeze them. I talked to a grower in Kansas, I think it was, and they asked me about that because they were told not to wash before freezing their berries. And but you need to check with your local folks because there are regional differences in all of the things we're talking about today. So be sure that you do that.
It's hard for me to imagine that they would not want you to sanitize them. Or they would before you use them. So we believe in clean fruit because we know the things that go on out there, and the birds are flying over, and there's always dirt and bugs and stems. And if you properly sanitize and wash the berries, they're going to be nice and clean. So we have our 3-part sink here where we have mixed up our sanitizing solution in the first one. And then the first thing you do before you process any berries is to sanitize everything. So you're going to wash the picking containers that you took to the field. You're going to wash the buckets you're going to pack in and the lids that you're going to pack in. You're going to wash the destemming surfaces off, the tables, the destemming machine. Everything needs to be sanitized with that first water from that first sink. So once you have everything sanitized, that first sink's probably going to need to be recharged with sanitizer and tested to make sure you're at the right spot.
And you've got to document all of this too.
You have to fill that out. There has to be documented on a little sheet. You want to keep that right by the processing area so that you can just write that down, and every time you change water, we probably change water every 300 pounds of berries or so.
Yeah, if you've got good pickers and they pick them pretty clean, it'll last. If you don't, if you've got volunteers, then
that's why
you might have to check more often.
Those test strips, you can always test it real quick to see where you're at.
Absolutely.
And when you get below 10 parts per million, you need to change all 3 sinks because you've been rinsing in the other sinks, and we want those rinse sinks to be really clean of water too. So first, then, once we have our sink set up, we'll take one of these colanders and we set this under the machine before we start it, where the berries come out. And this is what we're going to catch the berries in. So we'll place, there's 2 chambers in the top of the destemming machine in the TED, and you'll pour about 4 gallons of berries or so into the top of the machine and turn it on and let it start to shake. Lots of the berries will come off really fast, and then we'll kind of gently turn those umbrals over, get them out of the corners, flip them around, and when about 95% of the fruit has come off, you're pretty well destemmed all that you're going to go. A lot of the little green berries will stay on there, but some of them come off. There shouldn't be too many. So now, when this gets about half full of the berries, is when you want to shut off the machine. Then you remove the tray and you bring it over to the sink, the first sink that has the sanitizing water in it. And you're going to make sure that the level of your water is not taller than your tray. You don't want to set it, you want to keep the water level down so that you're not
losing berries over the thing.
I mean, the first time I used it, I had too much water in there and they went everywhere. So you want to make sure you don't have too much water in your sink. You place that into that sanitizing agent for about a minute. It's all it really takes. And then we like to strain off the debris. Your ripe, good berries will go to the bottom, and the unripe berries and the debris and insects will all float to the top. So then we take a little strainer, and I've used those French fry strainers, the little stainless steel ones, pretty inexpensive to buy. They're square, so they fit into the corners of sinks and the container. And then you just skim off those unripe berries, and there'll be stems in there and some insects. Once you get it skimmed off once, you're going to pull it up out of the water, let it drain into that sanitizing sink, and then move it to the second sink where you're going to repeat that same process. And this is rinse water, so you're getting rid of the chlorine. Stir the berries around a little bit, more debris will come to the top. Take your skimmer, skim that off, get it cleaned up good, pull it up, drain it, put it into the third sink for the final rinse. And you're going to do that same process. You're going to clean the berries that come to the top off and the debris. And you can keep all that stuff, Chris, and feed it to your chickens and your pigs, and they love it. It's really good.
We sold it to one person who made vinegar.
Sold it. See, you can even sell that leftover stuff. So there's some value in it, but generally we compost it or give it to the animals. And then you have a nice basket of clean berries. We put 25 pounds of clean sanitized berries in a 4-gallon square bucket. That's the standard size that we've set up for people to sell quantities in, and put about 60 of those buckets on a pallet. So you'll put the berries in there, weigh it up to the 25 pounds, put the lid on there, and then we always like to have a mallet, a nice rubber mallet, and you can knock that lid on there and make sure it's really on there tight. But you got to label it. You don't even know what you got yet. So you need to label that with the date that you processed it, and it needs to have your name or farm name on there, so that when you sell that, you have your name and the date it was processed on there. But if you're going to sell them to us, then you need to have a grower number also attached to that. And if you're going to sell directly to us, then you can call us and we'll get you a grower's number and set up a code system for you. But if you're not selling to us, then you don't really need to have your own grower number and be in the River Hills Harvest system.
Right. And Terry is on the board of Midwest Elderberry Cooperative, so there's a lot of mutuality here in what goes on. And one other thing to add, Terry, is I've had some people requesting particular cultivars. So some of the growers do note which cultivar is in that pail on that lid as well. So if someone wants Adams or someone wants Bob Gordon or Ranch, they can get what they want. And that's particularly important if you're selling direct.
Right. Some of the wine, because that Bob Gordon does make better wine, I think, than the others. And the universities have been working with make varietal wines out of some of the specific types of elderberries.
And then the other thing is, experience will teach you, but through the whole thing, whatever destemming process you're using, if you overload the destemmer, if you overload the system here, it's going to go more slowly. You've got to get the right amount so that the machine works carefully and you get the berries through there without squashing them, and it allows them to separate up. If you've got too many berries in here, you won't get a good separation of your floaters, the less ripe berries from those that are ripe, and insects will more likely get trapped and things. So you'll learn that from experience, but you want a modest amount. You don't want to go too heavy on any one of these runs.
But it makes them, when you get them all washed up and cleaned and in a bucket,
they're gorgeous.
They're gorgeous. And
Absolutely.
And you can sell them anywhere because
That's
you've
right.
met all the requirements that are needed to commercially sell those elderberries. The next step, though, is freezing.
Yeah.
So it's really important to get those berries froze as fast
Quickly.
as you can. At least within 24 hours, they should be solid frozen. So it takes a pretty good cooler. We usually set our cooler at 20 below zero at harvest and try to space the buckets out so that they get some air around them instead of putting them all in the corner or something. Leave them spread out so that they get some space and they can get frozen. Then when they're frozen, then you can stack them up into the storage area and put them all together.
On a smaller scale, we have some farmers that use the used freezers, chest freezers, and the key is that you first do not want to put them in too tight. You want to leave that space around them.
You can get a lot of berries in one of those chest freezers. You can get like up to 1,000 pounds in one chest freezer.
And the used appliances are one of the best deals here in America. And so take advantage of that, especially if you're starting out. We want you to make money on the way if that's your goal. And so start small. Use your head and work through this step by step.
Because you can, a lot of growers, if they're not going to be selling to us or commercial larger lots, they just put it in the bags, 3 pounds to a bag or 1 pound to a bag. I was in New York last week with a grower, and she was getting $10 a pound for her elderberries in 1 pound packages, and she was selling quite a bit. Around Missouri here, I think we usually get about $20 for a 3 pound bag of fresh destemmed elderberries. But people want the berries that don't have the stems. If you're going to make really good jelly or really good juice, having those stems in there will always give it an off flavor. And we worked for a long time to figure out how to get the very best juice out. And those stems do cause problems. So you really want to try to be careful and get them out. They're not going to hurt your health, but they just taste
The taste is not
bad.
what you want. And anyone who's ever tried to pick wild and make their own will be happy to pay the $7, $8, $9 a pound to get those destemmed berries that look pretty and don't have all that stuff in there and are mostly ripe the right way, as Terry was describing earlier. So it's worth your effort to follow this and to just observe your plant, get familiar with it, and work with it. Don't work against nature, work with nature.
And there's lots of opportunity to sell the smaller amounts.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people will sell those little bags, or that 3-pound bag's good for a little bit of somebody wants to make some wine. And if you don't have a destemmer and you have quite a few berries, there are other markets that you can
Right.
sell them into. The wine industry can handle a little bit more of that stem. They're used to it more because it's the only way you used to get the berries. So that's a good place to go with berries that have a little bit of stem on them. They can go ahead and take care of those. Sometimes they will even buy them frozen on the stem and run them through their little grape destemmer and get enough of them off and work that way. I know they really like the clean berries,
Yeah,
but you
it's
can
easier
sell
to work with.
some. It depends on what you're going to sell them for and what industry they're going to go into.
And if you are focusing more on direct sales off your farm, you will not have trouble having customers. I have people call me from all over the country. I had a lady call me from Miami, and I referred her to a farmer in the central part of Florida there, not too far from Orlando, and she drove up there to get her berries and pay that high price. That's how people are motivated, how strongly they're motivated to get elderberries. Sometimes.
And I've been hearing that they are motivated enough to do U-picks too. I know several growers I've worked with now have started putting in small U-picks, and I see the prices of the U-picks from $2.50 to $4 a pound, and they pick them, they destem them, and they have to freeze them, and it's hard to make any
Right.
more money than that on your farm.
Yeah, the key there is your pickers need to know what they're picking and what's ripe. We did that up in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, St. Paul area because we had a lot of folks there from Eastern European heritage. They knew what a ripe elderberry was, and we had them come and do some U-pick as well.
So we see there's so many opportunities in elderberry, for 1 pound package to
5 pounds.
20-ton truckloads. We need all the berries we can get. Everywhere in the United States, we can use more berries. 95% of the elderberries are still being imported
Right.
from Europe that we use in this country. They'll grow in every state. They make farmers money. They make communities healthy, and they'll make your land healthy. It'll bring prosperity to your farm. We'd like to see you grow some elderberries and get part of the elderberry energy going in your life.
And what he's saying is very true. On the commercial scale, the buyers are interested, but we do not have enough secured supply in large quantity for them to make commitments and to contract for that in advance, which is the goal of what the co-op's trying to set up.
So how many acres do you think the co-op needs?
Well, we need 2,250 acres in 5 years, and I've calculated we can easily support 22,500 acres of native elderberry growing in this country based on minimal use of elderberry products by the consumer at like a 1% rate. That's how much we need elderberry here and how much future there is in growing elderberry. I do not see a problem on demand and supply for 10 or 20 years at this point. Now, we do need some more infrastructure in place on the larger commercial scale, on continuous flow processing, for example. The destemmer that Terry's designed will do 400, 500, maybe 600 pounds an hour if someone's really skilled at doing it. But that's not enough to handle hundreds of acres yet.
No, but we keep working on it.
Yeah, we do.
We have the automatic cleaning system that we tried out last year, where those berries will come out, go through that wash and sanitizing system, come out a little conveyor, and go right into a bucket that you can weigh at 25 pounds to a bucket that will shut off. So we have the mechanisms to grow and to begin to take back some of this elderberry production that we're just bringing in from Europe. I mean, it's a great opportunity for farmers to grow a high-value crop and being able to take care of most of it themselves, from growing their own plants to selling those berries right from the farm to people.
Right, and we would not be talking about commercial-scale elderberry production without Terry's pioneering work and the fact that he owns and has a brand that is exclusively sourced in this country by native elderberries. This is what has given birth to the commercial scale of elderberry production in the United States, because he's been here from the beginning buying just about any berry he can get, and that hasn't changed. and I've got buyers lined up across the country that want thousands of pounds for over 200 small businesses, or I've got, like I said, the larger folks that want like 50,000, 80,000, 100,000 pounds, and we just don't have enough for them.
Well, hopefully we can begin to take some of this production back, and we can have more elderberry grown here in Missouri, bringing more health and more wealth to our communities and farmers all over this country. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you'll be able to tune in here at the end, and we'll answer them.